One of the big topics on your test is being able to write an equation from a graph. So here I've got a problem already worked out for you. Let's go over all the parts. So you can see here we have a graph, and I've labeled all the important pieces of that graph. First, you want to find the midline. So there we have the midline. It's in the middle of the graph. Usually we make a nice dashed line there. Then, once you have the midline, you can find the amplitude. The amplitude is from the middle to the top of the wave. So here I was able to count that. That distance is 4. From 3 all the way up to what looks like 7 is 4. You can also count the midline from the middle, or sorry, the amplitude from the middle to the bottom, same distance. All right, the next thing we want to take a look at is the period. That is the wavelength of your wave or sine or cosine function. So take a look here. I've got that marked in two different places. You can look at it from the bottom to the bottom of the wave. So there you can see that distance is 8. You can also take a look from the top to the top. So you can count from the top to the top and that distance. You could also go from middle to middle as long as you skip one and you make sure you're at the same part in your wave. So once you have all that identified, you can see I've got it identified over here. The first two are easy, midline, amplitude. The period is where you have to do some work because again, your period is not going to go in your equation. You have to use this formula, period is equal to 2 pi over b. So I put my period in there, 8, and now I have to solve this equation for b. So first you multiply b to the other side, then to get b by itself, you divide by the 8 on both sides, and then you get b is equal to pi over 4. Now that you've got all those pieces, you can now make your two equations. I decided to do two this time. So the first one, I decided not to use a phase shift. So I'm using this as my starting point here. So there's no side to side. It's starting at the bottom, so it's a negative cosine. So I have negative amplitude cosine. Then my b value next to the x, plus 3, that is my midline. And so if you want, you can then do another one by picking a different starting point. So you can see here, I've moved 2 to the right. That's put me right here for my starting point. Because that's in the middle, that is now sine, and so it becomes a positive sign because it's going up, sine because it's starting in the middle. You can see the b value is the same. I moved 2 to the right, so there's an x minus 2 for a phase shift, and my midline is still the same. All right, let's take a look at one more to make sure you can see how all those pieces fit together. So one big difference with this one is that now the x-axis is counting by pi's, but a lot of it remains the same. We first have to find the middle. So here, the middle is y equals 2. That's my midline. Next, I need the amplitude. So we're measuring from the middle to the top or from the middle to the bottom to find your amplitude. It should be the same. If they're not the same, then you didn't get the right midline. All right, so then, again, I label them over here to the side, midline, amplitude. Next is the period. You have to count from, here I'm doing the middle to middle. So that middle all the way to that middle. How far is that? I look down at my x-axis. That is 5 pi. I had to go from middle to middle on this one because if I try to do bottom to bottom, you can see that that doesn't line up on any of the lines from the graph. So that would have been really hard to count. So I had to look for another option, which was middle to middle. So now I know my period is 5 pi. We again have to do that quick equation. Period is equal to 2 pi over b. And then multiply b up to the other side. You get this, divide by 5 pi on both sides to get this, and the pi's cancel out, and the b value is 2/5. So here I did one equation here. Because this is my starting point here, it's in the middle, so we have sine. It's going down in the middle, so it's going to be a negative sign. Amplitude was 3, b value was 2/5, and the midline was 2. All right, so that's a skill you need to have for the test. You need to be able to write the equation of a wave using the amplitude, period, midline, and phase shift. So here are a few for you to try out yourself. Pause the video on each one, write the equation. So pause it here and then hit play once you're done and I'll show you the other graph. So pause it again on this graph. Once you have the equation, move on to the next video.